Is it just the four of us tonight?
That's actually a good question. I think Al should be here. Tom is away on an emergency call, so he will not be here, but I expect it's 4:30. Okay, well, I guess it's just the four of us, so it is 4:30. I'll call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, Tla-o-qui-aht. And I recommend that pursuant to Section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw number 1229, 2016, as amended, the November 23rd, 2021 regular meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel, and that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at Municipal Hall, 161 3rd Street in Tofino, BC. May I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Chalmers. All in favor? Thank you. If there's no opposition to adopting the agenda as presented, I will move adoption. Seeing no opposition, agenda is adopted. And if there is no opposition to adopting the consent agenda as presented, I will also move adoption. Seeing no opposition, consent agenda is adopted. Public comment on agenda items. Do we have a public comment? Miss Best.
Thank you, Mayor Law. We do have one member of the public requesting to speak to an item. Miss Eileen Floody is here, and Eileen, I'm going to allow you to speak. And you have 2 minutes, and please state your name and address for the public record.
Okay, thanks very much again for listening to me. My name is Eileen Floody. I live at 250 First Street in Tofino. I just wanted to add some information to my letter, which is under item 9.5, along with Gary Shaw's letter. I just want to let you know that there's probably at least 20 or more supporters to keep Tonquin Forest as a proper parkland and make it a proper parkland. So I'll read out some of the names of the people who have said that I can mention them today. So Simon Allison, Dolores Baswick, Barb Campbell, Darlene Choquette, David Floody, Sabine Hotz, Rosanna Laperouse, Chris Lowther, Sherry Marr, Giselle Martin, Tabitha McGregor, Michael Mullen, Kathleen Shaw, Jerry of course has a letter in, Tim Stevenson, Joanna Streetley, and Leah Ungstad. And also just today, I've discovered that Parks Canada, the government of Canada, has set aside, I believe it's about $130 million to support urban parks along with partners in communities across Canada. So perhaps that is a source of funding to help with Tonquin, because their focus is especially urban parks that are accessible without transportation. So Tonquin is our only park area or natural area that's that big and available for people to walk to from most of Tofino. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Floody. And if you could, I don't usually ask this, but if you could just send me a note about that new fund, that'd be great. Anybody else for public comment, Ms. Best?
Thank you, Mayor Law. There are no other requests for comments.
Okay, moving on to Mayor's report then. I was away for the week, and I'm very thankful that Councillor Stere was acting mayor and was able to attend the Remembrance Day ceremonies and carry on the business of the council. We've got a little, we have staff recognition. Trish Dixon is getting a 10-year staff recognition award. I don't have the award, all I have is a little piece of paper, but there is an award actually framed, and I saw it. So I'm going to read a little bit about Trish. Trish started with the district as a casual relief office worker in the summer of 2011, and shortly after moved into the role as an office assistant on November 21st, 2011. She worked in the front office assisting many departments until she moved into her current role as the office assistant 2 for engineering and public works in October 2019. On behalf of council, we would like to recognize Trish for her decade of service with the District of Tofino, and the manager of infrastructure services, Mr. Fraser Work, has a gift and a plaque for Trish that will be provided in person after this meeting. So congratulations, Trish. It's wonderful that you're on board, and well done. Well done. One of the beauties of modern technology is, even though I was away, I was able to view the council meeting, and I would like to, a part of my mayor's report, to make a correction. There was some misinformation, I believe, delivered by the West Coast Hospitality Association delegation in support of the proposed 1% service fee. Jasper was cited several times as an example of a municipality with a program in place to collect 1% for the town. And in fairness to the municipality of Jasper, this is not the case. Jasper does not collect 1% for the town of Jasper. There is, however, a Jasper Destination Marketing Corporation, which collects a voluntary 2% fee, which is used for marketing. And to note, Government of Alberta does levy a 4% tourism levy on accommodation providers. And also of note, for clarity for the public and for council, the 1% cited as collected by the City of Vancouver for the Vancouver Conference Centre, 1% collected by the City of Richmond for the Richmond Oval, and 1% collected by the City of Victoria for a pier come entirely from the MRDT. And that is for clarity going forward. Also a note, Councillor Stere is not here. He is on an emergency call. Moving on from the mayor's report, I believe we have delegations. Ms. Best.
Thank you, Mayor Law. We have a delegation from Mrs. Rachel Sutton. So Ms. Sutton, I'm going to turn on your ability to speak, and just take you one moment here. And you do have up to 10 minutes to speak as a delegation. So just one moment here. Okay. And Ms. Sutton, as soon as you begin speaking, I will start the timer. Ms. Sutton, I'm noticing that we're not hearing anything or seeing anything from you yet, but you are appearing on our main screen. So if we don't hear from you at this point, I may revert back to our chair, Mayor Law, and we may move back to this and see if we can sort you out with some technical support on the side. Okay.
Ms. Sutton, calling once, twice, thrice.
Oh.
Perhaps, let me just look at what's next.
Can you hear me now? Hi.
Okay.
Am I on?
You're on now. Go ahead. You have.
It's a real thing. Thank you, Council, for hearing me out. And I'm going to be so much more fun than I was last time I joined a meeting. I was under great duress, and I'd like to just back up and really acknowledge and apologize for my rash behavior. End of summer 2021, it impacted Bylaw, namely our friend Damon, a man who does good work. This arose due to my own serious discomfort among previous tenants. None of these people are on the land anymore. The district got behind me in removing people that were problematic. And I'd just like to begin by taking accountability when I've behaved in ways that are un-yogic. So thank you so much for letting me have some time to talk. Clearly, Tofino is facing some growing pains. And I happen to have a 2.6 acre piece here in Cox Bay. Some of you know that I run Slack Tide In. I'm a primarily solo mom. Love my child, love my community, and I've mostly had a really positive experience of Tofino as a community. And I'm grateful that I get to be heard by all of you. Slack Tide In is owned 99% by myself and 1% by my father. And we have a permitted extension that's been delayed due to drainage and the COVID-related concerns. Our licensed contractor is ready to go. The tiny home that I'm asking for a temporary use permit on the land is a temporary structure for until that permitted extension is complete. So we're hoping to build on the back of our property, and we've got it all squared out and ready to go now. We'd be interested in housing these tenants, Isa Iniko and Pierre Guayot, I want to say. I don't know for sure how to pronounce his last name, but they're lovely Brittany, France natives that are in the process of pursuing their Canadian citizenship. We love these tenants, and we'd love to house them legitimately in the future. So we're kind of already doing a little dance with you folks around getting our build completed, and we're hoping to complete that build by Valentine's Day, so not much longer. Isa is the housekeeping manager at the MAC, and Pierre is one of Garth Cameron's right-hand fellows. They both work extremely hard. They cause no issues at all, and their dog Enki is a heck of a bear slayer. We've had some bear approaches over this last year, the whole town has, but especially Cox Bay. Enki's been really defending the fort, which for me as a 5'3" mother has had me feeling really good. And they've added to my own homeland security out in the south end of this town. The money's collected, though not a huge amount, for rent from the tiny home that is being asked for. I'm asking for the temporary use permit. They help to offset costs of I closed during COVID to protect the town, and their rent is really helpful because I'm quite behind on some of my payments, as are many people at this time. I have my own health condition, so the tenant presence is a safety measure and a support in the event of I get migraines and seizures, which can be very nerve-wracking. And more than once, Isa and Pierre have jumped in to help me with my child and with the cleans that have to be done, usually by me, but I can't if I'm sick, when I'm hosting vacation rental guests. And I also have a current business license for my healthy and functioning vacation rental. Winter's here. It's not a great season to reject any responsible housing application. The rules, though, set about, they're a legitimate guideline with much discretion available to council. And I thank you for hearing me today, because I do think we have some pretty strong points to consider about how we treat our people and what we're doing about the imminent fallout of a housing shortage that's arisen very quickly in this beautiful area. There is a growing housing shortage for essential staff in Tofino, and then that is a tough one that I think you're all wrestling with already. There's a large and growing unregulated population living in trailers and on public land in and around the municipality. These particular tenants provide an essential service to my successful business. And the rental works to support me where my land backs onto the UNESCO biosphere. These tenants and their dog Enki provide extra protection and care from wild animals, wolves, bears, and cougars. They're highly helpful and they're very kind, worthwhile people that I think Canada as a whole would really like to see them get their permanent residence. It certainly helps if they've been living in the same area for a continuous amount of time. A couple more points I have to make before I just get to listen. The landlord-tenant branch of the government of BC has already judged in favor of one tenant who refused the landlord request by bylaw to move during COVID from a tiny home, despite municipal regulations. So the RTB really isn't behind you in asking people to leave homes, especially if there's a lease in place. I have routinely written leases for anyone renting from me because I do think in terms of business, and I try to operate in a fair and reasonable manner. So I will have to contend with the RTB if this request is refused. And I would just say gently, my last point would be that if council consistently rejects responsible applications against law-abiding individuals, while failing to address the growing housing black market that exists here, you'd be driving everyone further underground and potentially losing revenue in the process. It's highly souring, especially for people who work for between $15 and $25 an hour. Essentially, it's like a successful punk band being allowed to perform. Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate your consideration. I hope I could just listen to the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton. I don't believe we usually allow comments or questions for delegations from council, so we will move on. We have correspondence 9.1 from Jack Gilly, Tofino Ratepayers Association regarding the letter of support for MRDT. Any comments from council? Seeing none, I'll go ahead, Councillor Thick.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really appreciate the letter, and I think as someone who's representing over 200 taxpayers, I think it's a very strong letter, and I appreciate especially the last sentence in which Mr. Gilly says that that we've been working on this for a long time. We're on a fair and democratic track to make positive changes happen in regards to the MRDT. And I think it's, I just really want to say I appreciate the letter, and I appreciate just all the background that he has taken into consideration when he wrote the letter. And I certainly appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thick. No further comments. We'll move on. Letters regarding bear deaths 2021. Any comments from council? Just like to say we do appreciate council is very aware of bear deaths, and so is staff, and we'll be interested to hear what staff brings forward in the future, in the near future, for dealing with wildlife attractants and bears especially. 9.3, letters regarding MRDT. We have two letters from Catherine Kilpatrick. It's a letter of support for MRDT. Thank you very much. And also from Mike Daphne for support for MRDT. And the council would like to thank all the residents and businesses who have stepped up and supported application for MRDT use for a wastewater treatment plant, at least a portion of it. 9.4, correspondence from Elizabeth Newcomb, Executive Director of Vancouver Island Crisis Society regarding BC Crisis Line Network. Any comments from council on this one? Seeing none, we'll move on. This is always something that we can, maybe in a less critically busy time, we can approach our MLA. and discuss the crisis line. Letters regarding DL114 from Gary Shaw and Eileen Floody. We've heard from Ms. Floody. Opposition to development, further development on Tonquin Forest, DL114. Any comments from council? Yes, Councillor Thick.
Again, just to thank them for their letters, and also that I share and uphold their opinions about what they're coming forward with in regards to DL14, in particular, their question about the capacity of the area, the density, the ecological issues, and you know, it is adjacent to a world-class trail and a world-class beach, and the pressures and the capacity issues on there, I take very sincerely. So I appreciate their correspondence today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thick. Yes, and I do consider Tonquin Park DL114 a gem, and I look forward to hearing from staff coming forward as they've been directed to bring forward options for possible protection, which I look forward to. Correspondence from Kathy Peters, Be Amazing campaign regarding Vancouver Police Board presentation. And then this is, of course, to do with sexual trafficking, sexualized violence. And any comments from council? Seeing none, we'll move on. Perhaps in the new year, next year, Kathy Peters may return and give us an update presentation. I look forward to that. Presentations and reports. We have 10.1 Business License Regulation Bylaw, and we have a report from Protective Services. Chief Baker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time tonight. So as indicated, we are going to talk about Business License Regulation Amendment Bylaw. Just be one moment while I get my slideshow up. Sorry, folks. There we go. I think everybody can see that up there now, I think. Okay, so just a little bit of background. As identified at the November 1st, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting, the current Business License Regulation Bylaw 858-2000 was adopted in the year 2000 and has not seen any fee increases since that time, with the exception of Class 9.1, the tourist commercial sector. Staff have proposed a structured and equation-based increases to catch up and keep up with inflation. On November 1st, 2021, Council did resolve that staff be authorized to draft an updated fee schedule for the Business License Regulation Bylaw 858-2000 to allow for new fees and charges to come into effect for the 2022 business license year, and that all business classes except Class 9 increased by 20% for the year 2022, 20% for the year 2023, and an additional 2% per year each year after. And that business Class 9 tourist commercial be increased by 8% for the year 2022 and 2% for per year each year after. And that staff be authorized to continue the preparation of a new business license regulation bylaw to be introduced in 2022. For financial impact, business license Class 9, which makes up approximately 40% of the total license revenue, was increased by bylaw amendment in 2018. The proposed increase for 2022 would see this fee category increase by 8%. All other classes have not seen the increase since the current bylaw was adopted and would see a 20% increase for 2022. So based on the 2021 revenue for each class, this would result in an approximate increase of business license revenue for about $39,000 for the year 2022. For community engagement and communication, staff have provided an opportunity for persons who consider they are affected by the bylaw to make representations to council. And this has been with 2 notices that have been placed in the Westerly News, notifying the public of the intent to update the bylaw in November of 2021. And staff is recommending that the District of Tofino Business License Regulation Amendment Bylaw 858 1.0 2021 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time. And if there's any questions, I will just stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody. There we go.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Chief Baker. Comments, questions for Chief Baker from Council? Councillor Thick. And then Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you for the report. And I agree with what you're saying. So my question doesn't contradict that. I just wondered the rationale for the purposes of speaking to residents who might have questions, the 20% for 2022. Am I clear in understanding that's 2022 and 20% for 2023, and thereafter it goes up by 2%. So was that, were those figures considered so that it would have made sense if the increases had been given since the year 2000? I'm just trying to understand the logic. Thank you.
That's correct. We did look at how long it's been since those fees were implemented, and we took the approach of 2% per year since that time, or since their most recent increase in the other situation. And then we decided to not necessarily put that whole 40% right up front all at one time. So we tried to split it out over 2 years and then keep up with inflation by 2% per year after that.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Councillor Anderson.
My question was around short-term rentals. Is that a full 20% increase, or will that change year to year? And I was just wondering, I thought we were charging almost that much already for the short-term rental, and the temporary accommodation.
Yeah, so the short-term rentals, temporary accommodations, class 9-1, that's the exception to the 20% because those had been increased a few years back. So those ones are getting an 8% increase for 2022 because that's 2% since per year since the last time they were increased. So they would be 8% this year, and then each year after they're an additional 2%.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And any other questions or comments for Chief Baker? You know what, Chief Baker, I did have one comment, and maybe you could just comment on this. And it's not a question really about the increases, which I think are great, and I thank you for all that work. It was actually a comment on the amounts charged for short-term rentals as compared to resorts and campgrounds or RV parks. And I noticed that short-term rentals for the number of units pay quite a large amount compared to resorts and campgrounds, which appear to me to be quite a bit lower, certainly per unit. So when we're talking about fairness and equity, I just thought maybe this was a good time to bring that a bit of juxtaposition up and just ask for your insight on that.
Sure, I'll do my best on this one. So the hotels and resorts, they were in the same category as all the other businesses. They hadn't increased since the year 2000. When we increased the class 9-1 category about 5 years ago, that was in response to the massive increase in the number of vacation rentals that had come up. That increase at the time, from recollection, the primary purpose of that was to provide opportunity to fund the position for the business license inspector, because that category of license does require so much more staff time and work related than any of the other ones. Just looking at, when you look at the hotels and the campgrounds, they remain very, very consistent year after year. There's not follow-up inspections and that just to see what things have changed. It's very, very minimal work involved with those ones. Whereas the short-term rentals, there is compliance follow-up, there is inspections of just about every unit, and it's very demanding on staff time. So I think at the time that was the primary purpose. And so we've seen that one come up because that workload has increased and stays quite heavy, whereas the other ones are at a different level. Without looking to, or without having the opportunity to look too much further into it at this time, that's probably the best way that I could describe it. But I can look more into that as well too.
No, thank you for that. That's great. If we have no further comments or questions for Chief Baker, would somebody like to move the recommendation? Councillor McMaster, please go ahead.
I move that the District of Tofino Business License Regulation Amendment Bylaw number 858.10.2021 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Do we have any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Thank you, Chief Baker.
Thank you very much.
We have 10.2 housing agreement to 1141 Pacific Rim Highway. And we have a report from Miss Patterson. If we have no presentation, we can actually move straight to the recommendation.
I do have a presentation. Thanks, Mayor and Council. Sorry, I was just waiting for my video to start here.
Okay, great. Well, you go ahead. You've got your presentation. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
If you don't need a presentation, I'm happy to bypass, but I'll leave it up to you.
No, you go ahead. You're on.
All right, let me just share my screen here. I think this one's going to be relatively short.
Councillor Anderson, just checking to make sure your hand is that up or down? Perfect.
No, I don't think that you can see that. Sorry, bear with me for just a moment.
We've got housing agreement bylaw 1313 there. You had it.
Oh, was it up? Sorry,
Yep.
I could still
No, it
see
was
myself. So it was,
Yeah, if you go 3 clicks back or whatever you did there, you had it up.
let's try again.
There we go.
If you just do one more click, you'll have it full screen. You're in.
See it?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. Good evening, everyone. Mayor and Council. My name is Jill. I'm going to be presenting your housing agreement bylaw 1313 this evening. This housing agreement bylaw is coming into play in response to a temporary use permit that was issued back in October to 1141 Pacific Rim Highway. So this was, as mentioned, was a condition of the temporary use permit that was granted for 6 months. It is for a residential campground, staff accommodation in particular for 32 units, 50 occupants employed within the District of Tofino. So just some highlights from that report or from the bylaw. I wanted to pull out, most importantly, a qualified tenant definition is someone who can demonstrate to the satisfaction of the district that he or she has secured the part-time or full-time permanent employment within the district. So this is going to be housing agreement for local employees. And then the rental rates were established in response to, well, sorry, they were founded within the parameters of the affordable housing the survey that was done. So we found that it was well within the parameters of the rental rates that included inflation. So I just wanted to put those up there as well, so we could see what the spectrum of rental rates are going to be. And we asked we asked the council grants first, second, and third readings of this bylaw to be adopted at a following meeting. Any
Great.
questions or comments?
If you can minimize, if you can exit out of your screen
Sure.
share there, we can, I can see everybody on council. Great, thank you for that. Any questions or comments for Ms. Patterson from council? Hey, welcome, Councillor Stere. Seeing no questions or comment, Councillor McMaster.
I believe the campground is sold. Is that correct?
Sorry, you just cut out there, Councillor McMaster. Can you repeat your question?
I believe the campground is sold and has a new owner. Is that correct?
And it's my understanding that there is a sale pending, but the transfer of the property has not happened yet. So I've been working with the property owner, Matthew Amin, and working through this process with the understanding that there will be a sale, but his name and everything is going to be on the agreement. And then the agreement does hold with the title. So any subsequent owners will be subject to the same housing agreement.
Great, thank you for that.
Any further comments from council? Seeing none, would somebody like to read the recommendation? Or I can read it. Okay, so I recommend that the District of Tofino Housing Agreement Bylaw number 1313/2021 be read a first, second, and third time. Seconded by Councillor McMaster. Any further comments? All in favor? Seeing none, opposed, motion is carried. Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Patterson.
Thank you.
Moving on to 10.3, we have a temporary use permit application, 1430 Pacific Rim Highway, and we have a report from Ms. Patterson. That's great. Go ahead. You've got the screen again. I would say floor, but you actually have the screen.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. Just gonna pull up. All right, can everyone see this?
We can see it perfectly, yep.
Okay. So this evening I'm going to be presenting for the temporary use permit for 1430 Pacific Rim Highway. We did hear a delegation from the owner, Rachel Sutton, earlier this evening. So this temporary use permit application is actually a renewal application. The current temporary use permit that's in play is set to expire on December 9th. The initial temporary use that was granted was for a period of 9 months. So that's why it's a bit of a shorter term. Temporary use permit can be issued for up to a period of 3 years, just a bit of background, and renewed for up to one time. This application was evaluated through the scope of the official community plan. So I reviewed the land use designation, development permit areas, as well as the temporary use policy as outlined in the OCP. Background, again, the temporary use permit was approved in March of 2021 for a period of 9 months. The initial approval was to permit the current tenants an opportunity to seek alternative housing arrangements. So there was a tiny home / recreational vehicle on site that was housing a young family. Those tenants have since moved out. New tenants have moved in, and the applicant is seeking a 3-year term to permit full-time housing for these new tenants employed within the District of Tofino. I confirmed their employment with the letter of employment from their employer. So we do know that they are a full-time, or they are employed within the district. I should note that the previous, before I move on, the previous application, there was a recommendation for a housing agreement, but given the shorter term, they, Mr. Thick had presented that because of the short time frame, it would be impractical to run through the housing agreement process, adopting a bylaw, etc. And so we didn't move forward with the housing agreement for this shorter term period. The subject property is situated, as I mentioned, within the, it's in the peninsula designation, land use designation as outlined by the OCP. It is in a wildlife habitat development permit area that has since come into play, adopted in March of 9th, 2021. The current use is still residential and located at 1430 from highway. The total acreage is just under 2 acres. The current zoning is acreage residential district, which provides for the holding of rural residential land in medium-sized parcels. And this current use permits 1 single family dwelling, permits the home occupations, as well as 1 caretaker cottage or 1 secondary suite, and then accessory buildings and uses. So long-term camping is not a permitted use on this in this zone. Notification for this temporary use permit was mailed and hand delivered to 60 meters, within 60 meters of the property. There was a newspaper notification in the November 17th edition, and application was also made available to public at the municipal office leading up to today's meeting. Since that notification had gone out, we received 1 letter of opposition from a neighboring property, no letters of support. And the neighbor was citing concerns of zoning. So our recommendation today is to not approve the application because it generally does not align with the OCP policies. And I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Okay, I'm going to open this up for questions and comments for Ms. Patterson. Councillor Stere.
Yeah, I apologize for the late coming on, so I did not hear the delegation, of course. But I did have, it was my understanding that when the TUP was first granted, it was to provide a breathing room for the occupants of the trailer to find accommodation, and it appears that had been successful because my understanding from your report is that it is presently not habitated, I think was in the report. So I think the objective of the TUP was made is, and you'll have to excuse my ignorance on this one, is this in fact a new TUP that's being asked for, or is this a renewal of the one that we had previously granted with the objective was to find to give time for them to find appropriate housing?
Thank you, Councillor Stere. So the initial application was a renewal application, so it was processed as such. And then in review of the application, subsequent site visit that I did, it became clear that there were new tenants within the site. So hypothetically, it should have been a new application, but was processed as a renewal. So it was unclear. So I tried to do a bit of background searching, and this one is a bit of a complex case, but there were a number of, from what I understand, there was a number of tiny homes or recreational vehicles on site at the time that as a condition of the TUP, they had to remove, or the other tenants had to vacate. So it wasn't clear at the time of the application which tiny home was actually occupied, but in sort of my correspondence with the owner, it was determined that the tenants that were in the new temporary use application tiny home had been living within the residence and then were moved out into the tiny home.
Thank you.
Councillor McMaster, go ahead.
I agree with Councillor Stere. That's my recollection. We granted this temporary use permit to allow the tenants to find alternative accommodation. So I'm kind of gobsmacked that the landlord should turn around and rent it out to somebody else. Thank you.
Councillor Chalmers.
Thank you. I feel the same way as well. I do recall, and I might be wrong, so I just want to check that in the previous discussion about this, the OCP was one of the concerns, as well as I believe there was servicing issues. So to have that many units, is that correct? Do you know?
Thank you, Councillor Chalmers. So in reviewing this application, I did go back and look at the council meeting and review some of the previous application. And there was a referral to the Public Works Department in regards to the servicing, as that was addressed, that was brought up as a concern. And it was determined that the servicing loads, so as it stands right now, the property itself, it is zoned to permit a single family dwelling plus a caretaker's cottage. And so the servicing would have been enough to service this additional unit. But given that the piping from the public lands actually runs across through strata, it was deemed as jurisdictionally, it wasn't within the District of Tofino's realm of responsibility to determine whether that piping was sufficient for the units within the strata. So and I want to note that as well, the applicant at the time of the application, I believe, had a secondary suite with the, within the primary residence, there was the primary dwelling and then the secondary suite. That secondary suite has since been decommissioned, so it's actually considered one single family dwelling. So right now she is zoned for the construction of a caretaker's cottage. So in terms of servicing, they would be the same draw.
Sorry, my follow-up there, I think I've confused myself. I was under the impression from the delegation that there was also a vacation rental, a short-term rental. So so does that make it 3 suites or 2 or 3 units, I guess?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Chalmers. So the suite was decommissioned in the sense that there was a building permit pulled that resulted in the construction of a stairwell from the main suite upstairs to the units downstairs. So now that home is actually under the licensing of a bed and breakfast. So the bed, so that's where the concern for the bedrooms is coming in.
Thank you. Further questions for Ms. Patterson from Council? Councillor Thick.
Thank you for the presentation. And I also have some challenges with this request. I heard in the delegation from the proponent that the property was 2.6 acres. At least that's what I have written. It's just under 2 acres. I checked online and see that the website that promotes this short-term rental is listed as 2 units. I hear differently now, but what I see on the website for Tla-o-qui-aht Inn is 2 separate units are available for rent. So I'm looking at this conflicting, and I'm hearing and reading from past discussion that this was a questionable okay in March when the TUP was first given. So from my perspective, I think it's very clear what is allowed and what can be done on an RA2 lot. And long-term camping, as you said, is not permitted. And it is very clear that a caretaker's cottage is permitted. And I think with that understanding, I think that for me, I can't support this at this time. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson. Councillor Anderson, you're muted.
Sorry. My question was around the tiny home. Am I correct in that this does not qualify as a caretaker's cottage. It's probably not built with a building permit. And is that the use that the temporary use permit is actually going to, or we're considering allowing? Does my question make sense?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. What I think you're asking is if the temporary use is going to permit. Yeah, sorry. I just to,
Well,
just
like,
to
is it
backtrack
the
a little
tiny
bit.
home that we're permitting basically, and the occupancy of it?
Yes, thank you. So the tiny home has not been constructed as per building code, so it would not qualify as a caretaker's cottage. So there's two parts to, sort of two ways to answer your question. But the temporary use permit would then be permitting the use of a habitable space that does not meet CSA regulations.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions for Ms. Patterson? I do have a couple questions. No, Ms. Patterson, I do have a question. I seem to recall, and I guess I should have looked at the video, but from the previous meeting. But it seems to me when this present and soon to expire temporary use permit was granted, there were several other temporary RVs or accommodations as well on the property. Is that correct? And then is that not correct, or am I wrong about that?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Law. It is my understanding that there were a number of temporary tiny homes / recreation vehicles that were inhabited on the property at the time. And the applicant was very forthcoming with that and brought the property into compliance to meet the conditions of this temporary use permit that was issued back in March. And so at the time of my site visit, there was just the one tiny home being inhabited.
Sure. And my second question is just goes back to the presentation from the applicant just at the beginning of the meeting here. She is applying to construct a permanent dwelling or caretaker cottage on the property, or was it an extension onto the house? Just get your insight into that.
Thank you, Mayor Law. It is my understanding that there has been an application submitted for an addition to the back of the house.
Okay, thank you very much. And one final question. This is, in fact, the tiny home that was vacated that was supposed to be moved. Is that I supposed to be moved, but then wasn't moved, and then just for ultra clarity, new people moved in.
Thank you, Mayor Law. So to clarify, yes, so I could not determine which tiny home the initial TUP was issued for, because like I said, there was a number on property that were inhabited. And so there was sort of a mass evacuation of sorts that happened and left one tenant, and I'm not sure which tiny home that tenant was residing in. But those tenants had subsequently left the property. They'd moved and found alternative housing as per the temporary use condition. And then new tenants were moved in from the primary residence into the tiny home that was since vacated. So these are new tenants, not the tenants that were in place at the time of the initial TUP approval.
Thank you very much for that. Any further questions for Ms. Patterson? No. Okay, well then I think what we can do is somebody can read the motion that's put forward to us. Councillor Thick, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I would like to move the recommendation that the temporary use permit attached as Appendix 1 to the staff report temporary use permit Sutton 1430 Pacific Rim Highway be considered and denied.
And then we have a seconder from Councillor McMaster. Now, I think at this point, I know there was lots of questions, and I think at this point I'd like to open it up to council for discussion to see if there is any indication from council that that this motion be at all not supported and moving into a possible TUP to support. So I'm going to open it up to council right now for comments and deliberation on the motion that's before us. Seeing none. Councillor Stere? No, none. I do have a little bit of a comment. I think my tendency I was on the, of course, council, as many of you were to advance the previous TUP so that the folks that were staying there in their own tiny home could move the tiny home. And at that time, there were several other people living on the property in tiny vehicles or RVs or something like that. And it sounds like it's been generally cleaned up and there's one tiny home remaining, and that the applicant does have something in the process to expand their residence. So I must say that that although I agree with most of council's comments and questions, or the intent of your questions, I believe, I do think that there is the possibility for relaxing this and applying some kind of TUP. But I think I'm in the minority, so I'm going to open it up to council. Councillor Stere.
Yeah, I just think the intent of the original TUP that was issued was such that the obligations of that have been met, and the purpose of that TUP has been met. And if there would have been a subsequent a new TUP that might have been asked for, I might have considered that, but not the particular renewal of this one, because the intent of it was met. And I congratulate the tenants and the applicant for accomplishing that. But the goal of this TUP has been met. So at this point, it would be difficult for me to renew this particular TUP.
Very good points. Thank you for that insight, Councillor Stere. If there are no further comments, then Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I have to agree with the staff recommendation to not move ahead. I think it's just time that they got back to the zoning that's in place, and that this is part of a strata. We did receive a letter of not supporting from a neighbor. So I think it's just time that they got back to the uses permitted in their original zoning. So, and also I agree with other council members that the intent was to remove those uses, but not cause undue harm to the people that were living there at the time. And now there's more people living there. So I agree with Councillor Stere that those purposes have been met. So I would support the recommendation.
And Councillor Chalmers, please go ahead.
Thanks. I agree with both Councillor Anderson and Councillor Stere, and I just want to sort of expand on it a little bit in that exactly a temporary use permit is to move something forward to a point of the new zoning or something like that. And if the applicant was looking to rezone or which it sounds like they're looking to do an expansion, I think that's great and a good way forward. The idea of the TUP was to help get to that point. And by removing the original tenants, it was a step closer, which is also why I'm not in favor of renewing the TUP. So I just wanted to let the applicant understand that as well.
Thank you for that, Councillor Chalmers. Any other further comments? Noting no more comments, I will call a question. All those in favor of the motion as presented? Any opposed? None opposed. Okay, the motion is carried. Moving on to business initiated by council members. Councillor Stere, I see your name twice.
Right. And once again, I do apologize for coming late, and I'm still recovering. I'm somewhat hypothermic, so hopefully I will get this out appropriately. Which is got regional district first. So I will flip my page here. This is an update we just on the ACRD, the West Coast Committee. ACRD board meeting will be tomorrow, but some of the things that came up in the West Coast Committee I think are relative to the District of Tofino and to the board, or to the councillors here. So we had a presentation from Bob Hansen at WildSafe BC, and I have encouraged him to bring a delegation again to Tofino Council. We have had a lot of concerns around, specifically around the bear interactions in the communities, and he did give an overall view from the ACRD perspective, but many of the issues were relevant to Tofino as well. So I have encouraged him to reach out. It was an overview of the programs, but then we had touched on some of the issues in the ACRD region, specifically Tofino, Ucluelet, and Area C. So I will encourage him to do that and present those to council. There was another issue that has relevance, and it is around back in August. The West Coast Committee had recommended to the board to look into the potential of a campground at the Long Beach Airport for West Coast or West Coast workers. And at that meeting in August, it went to the board, and the recommendation to there was for staff to look into that possibility. And what that's ended up doing is raising some of the larger issues around those airport lands and around the long-term development up there. And so at this point, that staff report that came back was really interesting in the sense that the overall long-term development planning for lands at the Long Beach Airport, the recommendation from staff was we need to look more comprehensively and to establish that long-term plan before we start looking at these individual requests, because there has been on the short-term time that I've been on the ACRD, there's been an incredible amount of interest in those lands, not least of which has been long-standing between the multiplex and other areas there. And there are a lot of complicated issues that have come up there. So one of the recommendations has been for to look at that long-term planning, and that staff will bring back a very comprehensive plan. There was a lot that is involved, everything from site contamination to servicing to many of the long-term lease implications that are up there. There has been a tremendous amount of interest, especially from it seems to be the Tofino end of things, but not exclusive to. And so this recommendation will go to the board tomorrow to look at the long-term planning process, which has multiple factors in it. And if it does pass, I will present more of that complex plan that was moving forward. Some good news at the West Coast Committee is around the West Coast Organics Diversion Project, which is coming to a community close to you. Tofino will be getting its 3-stream sort and go, which Alberni was phase 1 and has met with tremendous success there. In terms of the diversion of organics specifically, it went wildly beyond expectations. So this is great news. We're looking at on the West Coast here for the recycling. It's the 3-part. It'll be your regular garbage, your recycling, and then organics. They will have specialized carts that are already purchased and ready to be rolled out. And we're hoping to have the rollout of the program in the fall of 2022. Right now at the West Coast landfill, the compost facility, the design has been awarded, and it's very exciting. It's a pipeline grade aerated static pile composting system, and I'll send you all the information for those of you that are really interested. There's an RFP coming out in January for the construction, which is hopefully to be completed in the summer of 2022. The costs were substantially higher, and that's because there was an expanded sort of service component to it. So that being said, the estimated cost when you get property owners will be as we get the bill for our garbage and recycling. It is still an incredible deal, but it will go up to, and the estimate right now is about $200 per household. And this is in line with neighboring communities that are providing this similar service. In fact, for the service we are getting, it's highly acknowledged that we're getting an incredible deal. And I think and that's really to the credit of the staff at the ACRD, and specifically Jenny Brune, whose work has been incredible there to bring this service to the West Coast. So that is it for the ACRD and specifically the West Coast Committee update. And then the next one is the Wickaninnish Community School Society. There was a board meeting, the November board meeting, and a few interesting things that I think are relative and I think important for the councillors to hear. First of all, there's a new, fairly new coordinator, Caleb Harding, who took over from Ann Weeks. He's doing a great job, and I've reached out to him to maybe do a presentation to council, as Ann Weeks had done in the past, just to keep those councillors that may not be familiar with the Community School Society and the role that it plays. Some of the highlights that we do support, by the way, through a financial contribution to the community school, and some of the things that's been supporting, for example, has been the homework club, which has doubled in capacity. And this really helps to support working families. So that's a homework club that's from after school, from roughly about 4:15 to 4:45. That's been, the capacity has doubled and has been fully booked. We also help with the hangout sessions, which is a new program. Once again, it's a supervised time slot that is in place, and it's in the gym area. And it's another area where the DOT's, the District of Tofino's support has been incredibly beneficial. Those hangout sessions have been, I wouldn't say oversubscribed, but they're right at capacity. So the service is well used. The one that I think a lot of council would be aware of is the gym space and those community slot times and evening gym times. Which we've been working very closely with the community school coordinator and our programmer, Laura Lunty. And I'll do a little speech about Laura because she's leaving. I think she's already left, but she's worked really closely with the Community School Society to provide programming, time, coordination. And so right now that 4 to 7 basketball time slot for USS, the high school team, that gym at the high school is not quite finished yet. So that team has been able to practice in our gym. There's also been intermediate, advanced, and indoor soccer that's been taking place on those community slot times. The evening gym times, there's great programming going on in the Wednesday evening for sort of the right now, I would call it men's basketball, but it's an opportunity for everyone. It's incredibly well attended. The numbers are phenomenal. There's also the discussions around times for pickleball and potentially badminton. So in essence, a racket sport night. There's also been discussions with the programmers about other gym space sports orientated slots. There was some suggestions from the community school around things like board game nights, etc., where we do have a community hall that can take care of that particular programming needs that we think the gym should more of those sort of physical sport activities where that gym time slot would be there. And so that does bring me to I wanted to take this opportunity to give a real strong shout out to Laura Lunty, who's been with the district for quite some time and is I'll use the word retiring, but that's not quite right. But she is moving on to spend more time with her family at this point in time. It's a high priority area for Laura, and I've worked with Laura outside of my council days, back on the rec commission, and even before that, and as a coach, and worked with her very closely. She has been an incredible community asset, and I'm looking at Bob right now, but I certainly know from the district's perspective, an incredible asset to the District of Tofino and the staff here. And I don't know if she's already been given a shout out yet, but and I just wanted to really take this opportunity to thank her for her service. And she's assured me that she will still stay engaged in supporting the recreational needs of this community. And I hope to work with her further into the future. So that is it for the update for the Community School Society.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stere. Thanks for your hard work on those two, ACRD and Community School Society. All right, we moving into unfinished business. Any unfinished business? Lots of oh man, there's so much unfinished business, but we're not going to discuss it right now. Moving into question period 13. Is there anybody signed up for question period? Ms. Best.
Thank you, Mayor Law. Currently, there are no people signed up for the question period, but I just wanted to remind the members of the public that are here, we have a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen of the main Zoom window. So if you do have a question, you have about 5 seconds to type something in quick. I will call once, I will call twice, and I will call thrice. And it looks like we have no submissions for questions. Thank you.
Okay, without further ado, then we'll move into closed session. So I recommend that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 90, parentheses 1 of the Community Charter to discuss matters related to A, personal information about an individual who holds or is being considered for a position of as an officer, employee, or agent. C, employee relations. E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements. K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at the preliminary stages. And 2B, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and a provincial government or a federal government. Seconded by Councillor Chalmers. Excellent. All in favor?